Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the June 3rd, 2020 Abington Finance Committee meeting. We are meeting tonight again on Zoom. We are continuing to prepare for town meeting, which is now looking very strongly like it will be held in just under 3 weeks on Monday, June 22nd, 2020, with provided that the Mass State Legislature moves forward with it. We will be meeting with a lower limited quorum. If that does not move forward, then we will be excuse me, sorry about that. We will be postponing town meeting until a future date where we can have it outside. We are continuing to review warrant articles tonight, reviewing the schedule of town meeting, etc., going over our recommendations for any last outstanding articles, discussing anything that we still have questions about, and then we'll go through our normal correspondence, liaison reports, review of minutes, do a quick share for, oh, can't quite share unless Matt from Abington Cam gives me the ability.
You should be all set to share.
All right, thanks, Matt. So right there, hopefully you can see my screen now, where we have the agenda for tonight's meeting. Jumping right in, we already town meeting, as mentioned in the introduction or the preamble to the meeting, will be less than 3 weeks away now, provided the legislature passes the bill that's going through to allow towns to reduce quorums. There is a lot of confidence that will be passed, so it looks like we'll be meeting at 7 o'clock at the high school auditorium on the 22nd. Does anyone have any questions about town meeting? There's a plan being put in place to allow it to be done with proper social distancing, people the appropriate number of feet apart, appropriate microphones for the appropriate people, and then microphones that can be cleaned when townspeople speak.
Masks.
Masks are expected, yes. And if you are feeling sick, do not come, please.
People will be bringing their own mask. I'm sorry, that's what I meant.
Scott, were you going to say something?
Yeah, we're expecting everyone, and we'll put the announcement out that we expect you to bring your own mask. Unless there's a condition that you have that would otherwise preclude you from wearing a mask. And we have a section where you would sit if you are unable to wear a mask for health reasons or whatever. If they come and they don't have a mask, we will have them hand out also.
It's good to hear. Any other questions about timing or logistics for town meeting? All right. Moving along, heading to the warrant articles, we should have some, we have a couple that we need to still vote our recommendations on. We have a change to one of the articles that I'll get to in a moment, and then we'll have discussion on any that we need reopened, and there's one that I have a question for Sue on myself. First, the budget. Scott or Sue, has there been any additional information from the state?
No, regarding revenue or anything,
Right.
no, nothing.
Local aid, okay. Nothing new from the state.
No.
I do have a follow-up to Chris's question last week. One of the things that I did note in the most recent version of the budget, which I will call up to my screen. So this is a document created yesterday with the most recent version of the warrant. As we can see, the budget is item number 1 on the warrant. We have a good amount of detail in there. And as we come down to page 5, total town operating budget, I'm going to highlight over here the recommendation from both town manager and the finance committee, Chris. So we were talking about how we started out at 56 million, and then we were trying to remove from the budget.
Yeah.
Budget is at 54.9
Okay, all right.
now
That's
in the
good.
printed warrant.
That's different than what we got last week.
Yep. And this is I think the number that we were expecting to see last week, and I think it was just misprinted last week. So, Sue and Scott, does that ring true with you?
Yeah, I think we hadn't given you the most updated, obviously,
Yep.
budget. And the one I was working on was not updated.
Right. Anyone with any questions or points to discuss on the budget itself? Sue?
So we usually have like you guys motion to approve, but the motion that I usually put together is where the funding sources are coming from. So I don't know if you want to take a vote on, I don't know if you can have another meeting next week, but to take a vote on that motion next week, and understand that obviously we have raise and appropriate for the budget, and we have the indirect costs. There is the cable access on here, and I know that there's some question as to whether or not that the money that's coming to the town is just a pass-through, or do they have to provide expenditures. So I have a question about how I am writing the motion for the enterprise fund for the cable access, and with the fact that they already have funds set like in their bank accounts now that's not town funds. So what is the motion going to be for providing the revenue for the enterprise fund? Are we going to have them use the funds that they're currently sitting on while the town continues to get payments from Verizon and Comcast, which are coming in quarterly, but they're not getting applied as quickly as we would like because of the lack of staffing and because of COVID. So I need to know what the funding source is for that one particularly. I know how I can, to make everything else happen. And if you guys, once I put that motion together, I need to present it to you to say that you guys approve the motion on that, on the whole budget and all the enterprise funds.
So from my experience, and Barbara or Sean, please chime in as well. From my experience, when the finance committee has provided its recommendation, we've provided a recommendation on whether or not we are recommending the budget, like as a whole and as a total. And we have not, to the best of my knowledge in the past, before our recommendation, gone into details of the specifics of funding sources for the budget article. Is that correct to your recollection, Barbara or Sean?
Right, you usually recommend the budget as presented,
Raise-
but then I present the motion. So I don't know if it's Scott's guidance or your guidance as to what the motion is for specifically the cable access enterprise fund.
Because we have, the motion is typically, is it raise and appropriate?
It's typically let me see. So it would be like, so it would be the general fund, and then the general fund indirect costs from the enterprise funds, and the enterprise funds would pay back the general fund, and then the rest of it would be from anticipated receipts from sewer, water, ambulance, cable. I haven't seen the money the 300 and something thousand dollars that we used last year. I haven't seen that this year coming into FY20. So how can we expect that for FY21? So how do we fund the cable access? And that came up as a question today because Lisa, well, a couple days ago, Lisa did ask me what kind of money was in there. And right now, they budgeted $350,000 for FY20, and we've only booked about $36,000. So
that's a
DOR will have
shortfall.
problems with that.
But they have money in the account.
They have money in ABCAM's account, not in the town's side, from what I'm understanding. So I don't know how to fund that budget. Do we say they need to use ABCAM's money until we are able to get enough money in the town side to fund the budget that they're requesting? Because we don't have the resources right now to fund what they requested last year and this year. And when I get to DOR, they're not going to approve this year's budget if I'm asking for $300 something thousand and we've only received 90,000.
Do we know how much is in their account?
Right now, there's $2.57.
No, in the ABCAM's bank account.
Oh, in the ABCAM, I don't know. I was told by somebody on the committee that they do have close to $1 million, but don't hold me to that. That's just what I was told by somebody on the committee. So I don't know how to put a motion to that specific fund because we don't have the money on the town side.
So Matt, just for a matter of decorum, you had asked a question. So one, and I think Sue is spot on, right? So our goal here is whenever we're looking at these budgets, so there has to be a source and use of funds. So they've identified a use of funds, but we haven't identified an appropriate funding source. So most notably, when we look at other enterprise accounts, you'll see transfer of available funds, raise an appropriate, move from this one particular budget or bucket to another bucket. In this particular instance, I mean, you don't have the cash to fund it. So from this particular point, and I don't know the mechanics, and I rely on the town manager. You know, my 15 plus years on this particular committee, I don't recall. But in my view, unless we've identified a source of funds, I think then the answer is pretty simple. We move nothing. And they become self-sufficient, and it becomes either part of a special in the next fiscal year, or we figure a different way to true it up, or the town manager and the town accountant find some miraculous way to say, no, we've identified an appropriate source. If we scour the budget and we feel as though it's a necessary point that we should be funding in the current fiscal climate, then we can identify and say, hey, FOG, here's our view. We're going to squirrel away money from this account, this account, this account, this account, identify how much does that upset the apple cart. That's too much heavy lifting. I think the common sense of it all is, do you have the money, yes or no? You don't have the money, and there is an available pot of cash that we don't control, that their governance says that they can. Maybe that's the discussion point that you have to have. So for within the scope of the Finance Committee, can we identify where the money's coming from? Because ultimately, the statistician 1 and statistician 2 will be cranking on a computer like we all are right now, saying, huh, we're in an override position. That's weird. I don't think anybody wants to have that.
But the money is coming from Comcast and Verizon, and we're kind of the middleman there.
So for discussion purposes and for informational purposes, up until last year, the money going to Abington CAM for their budget from Verizon and Comcast was coming to them directly, correct?
Right.
And last year, it was determined that due to new state regulations, rules, the money is supposed to pass through the town to the local cable access company. It's supposed to go into a revolving account. correct? Or is it?
It's actually a
revolving?
PEG access, well, the
PEG.
article that's on the warrant is to make it a PEG access enterprise fund.
Right, and it was some other form of PEG access fund that we set it up as of last year. But in concept, the money is supposed to be coming from Verizon and Comcast to us to hand over to Abington CAM,
Not
correct?
necessarily hand over. They have to show their expenditures just like any other enterprise fund.
Okay.
Just so we're clear on that.
So my question, with $2.50 in the account, are we not receiving the money from Comcast and Verizon?
We have received a check that was applied, and we have 2 more checks sitting in waiting to be applied to the system, but due to COVID and the lack of staff in the treasurer collector's office and my office, it's been put in the bank, but it hasn't been applied to the financial system. So, but even still, they were looking for $300,000 for FY20, and we've only received about 90.
And that covers the entire year's worth of.
I believe that goes through the 3rd quarter. So we would have another quarter coming in, but that money's not going to come in until July, FY21.
And I would assume that we're not expecting that money to be $210,000.
Correct. It's about between Verizon and Comcast, their checks are about $30,000 a piece.
Each
Per-
quarter.
And Verizon
quarter.
didn't start sending it to us until the 3rd quarter. I assume they were still sending it to Abcam. I'm not sure. Comcast sent it to us ahead, like in the beginning, 2nd quarter probably, but it did not transition as it was supposed to as of July 1.
So it didn't transition, so we don't have a 100% certainty on what the expected revenues for fiscal year 21 that will come into that account are.
Correct.
The Abington CAM clearly is expecting that to be around 300,000. What we have seen so far does not necessarily bear that out.
Even if you take what I received in the last quarter from Verizon and Comcast, and they're about between 32 and 34,000, you're still not hitting the $350,000 mark. You're looking at about $280,000 that's coming into the town. So we can't have a budget of 300 and something thousand. And I'm sorry it's last minute, but when she sent me the question last week about how much money was in there, and I did some research, we're literally getting about $260,000 a year, not 300 and something. So I don't know how to fund that particular line item and what to motion on it. But it needs to be done,
Now.
post 10 days before town meeting.
Yep. Discussion.
Did this just change, or has it always been this amount of money? Why are we? I guess I don't really even understand why we're short.
The town has never seen the money. The checks were always getting sent directly to Abcam until last year's meeting, a town meeting that made it an enterprise fund. And because the state required it to be funneled through the town so that there is some sort of oversee of what the expenditures are and what the revenue is. So we never knew what the actual dollar amount was because we weren't the holder of the records.
So we think that the first 2 quarters, the money went right to the cable people.
Or at least the first quarter.
At least definitely the first quarter, but for one of them, you said the 2nd quarter as well. So
Right.
we
I can't guarantee. I don't know where the money went. I just know we didn't get it.
Didn't come to us, to the town.
Can we ask them to give us the money that they got? Because it should have come from us.
I know Rick was communicating with Verizon and Comcast, and they were supposed to send me a breakdown of what they've produced so far, and I haven't received it. I haven't received the email that was supposed to be sent to me with the quarterly statements.
But I'm talking about the cast that they.
The
cast
past,
that
no,
was
the
supposed to
past,
get.
everything went through ABCAM.
So I think Chris's question is the funds that were supposed to go from Comcast and Verizon to the town that we believe went directly to ABCAM. Could those funds be taken from the ABCAM account, put into the town enterprise fund?
Well, no, I guess not necessarily put into the enterprise fund, but used to fund their requested budget. So like currently the town does not have the sufficient amount of money. And from what I'm being told, that the ABCAM is with their own tax ID, have their own bank account, and there is money there to fund their expenditures for the year, that maybe we should like let it go out another year to see if we can get a handle on what we actually are getting
Accounting
in.
for it and what's actually coming in and what can
Correct.
fulfill requests. If we need to know how much, we have no history on it.
Correct.
But the money that you've gotten so far in the third quarter, that's for fiscal year 20.
Correct.
Correct.
Third quarter of FY20.
So what we're voting on is fiscal year 21.
Yes.
Correct.
So why wouldn't we vote on 4 times what the last quarter that you got was, and tell them, if you want to have a bigger budget, that's your problem. This is all we're gonna pass. That make sense, anybody?
Have we received their expenditures, a list of expenditures, or
I did get one request from their committee, but that was based on the first payment that we got, and it was back until, so I want to say the request was in maybe February, March, and it was from July through that time period, and that's where it basically, we got the $33,000 or $34,000, and their request brought it down to $2.57. So I don't know what their future requests are. I know what their budget is. It's $351, I believe, for FY20. And I think it's pretty much the same for FY21, but I haven't seen that kind of revenue coming in.
I'm talking about, don't we receive like a budget from them?
Yes, they did
Submit
specify
something with,
what's in this article under cable access is what they requested as a budget. Right,
Okay.
Go ahead, Matt, thank you.
You know where about that is?
It's all the way down at the bottom after, and right there. So cable access, so they're requesting $360,000.
no, what I meant is, what, is there a breakdown?
No, it's just
So
a
then
flat
they
number
have
that I received.
Cable revenues in FY21 anticipated at 367. So do we know where they're coming up with that estimated?
I do
revenue?
not, I just got a bottom line number.
So I think, and I like you, I also talked to a member of the committee at one point a couple of weeks ago when some of this first started percolating. And I do believe that they have funds in their own account that would at least potentially be able to cover the full expenses list in the budget here. So I think the question is how do we word the revenue source for this? And
Matt, can I offer just a counter, if you don't mind, just for sensibility for a second? So I think the town accountant's asking a great question. First and foremost, if we're looking at how enterprise accounts should be presented, the town truly is given 3 separate options. And any way you look at it, it's either self-sufficient, you're going to create a budgeted surplus, or you have some need for a town-side subsidy. So if I look at these two lump, here's your revenue, and they're citing $361,000 worth of revenue. Strike that, $361,000 worth of expenses and $367,000 worth of revenue. The risk on the town, if we're budgeting as for a subsidy, is whatever the delta is they don't receive. So Sue is right to say, hey, if you budget based on this number that you have no basis to know, you're going to get it. And we don't know that it's 4 times 90,000. We don't know if it's 4 times $5. So the biggest challenge here is, okay, so this is, it has its own governance. It should be obligated to put in what the estimated revenues are going to be, what they expect for any retained earnings from a carry forward and what's in their own account, what their expenses are, and then truly what the town responsibility happens to be. So in my humble opinion, I think it would be premature for us to make any motions or recommendations on how to word anything until such time as they come to the table with a clear detail and conform with the DLS, Division of Local Services, and say, hey, this is exactly how we're going to put funds into the enterprise account and how we're going to take funds out of it. To simply give us 2 lumps, I think is disrespectful at the least. And I feel as though we're trying to MacGyver a solution without information.
Agreed.
So we have until next week to get our recommendations done. Would it be possible to have representation from the Abington CAM committee on to discuss this next week, and we make our recommendation on the overall budget? Does that provide us enough time?
Mr. Chairman, I think, I feel, I strongly urge us to say, does the town accountant have the appropriate information to submit to the DOR to certify that this particular enterprise account actually is structured and funded appropriately, and it does not put the town in harm's way with having to subsidize any loss? Because how do you make a recommendation without knowing, beyond having cable, the ABCOM come to us and say, no, here it is? The town manager and the town accountant need to actually say, here, we got it, we believe in it, we feel this should be moved forward. So their explanation, in my view, while it would be generous to hear, unless we see a piece of paper that is emblematic of, here's what we expect to take in, here's what we expect that what we have currently in accounts that we're going to consider retained earnings, here's the total value of the account, and here's how we're going to spend it, and here's what we expect at the balance at the end of the account. Until such time as you have that, how do you make a recommendation on anything?
Well, we'll have to get you that information by next week.
So what are the options if we don't have all the information before the meeting?
We can vote to approve the budget minus, I forget the wording, but you can vote to approve the budget. Sean, do you remember how that goes when you're going to preclude a certain aspect of it?
You can accept the town. So the town, since the legislative body, the town meeting can accept a certain aspect of the budget, and they, unless we're going to come with a balanced budget or identify sources of funds, at the end of the day, if we don't have validation that revenues are going to come in, we're going to have to either do, the mechanics are the professional staff on the phone, but they're the ones that are going to have to say we're either going to be able to do an interdepartmental budget transfer at the end of the year, or you're going to risk, and I don't think this is the case, but you're going to risk yourself in your deficit spend, which you can't do. So to answer your question, Barbara, is you accept the line item.
Or you could also say that we are confident in this amount of revenue, and if they want that kind of budget, then they provide additional funding through their coffers, which the DOR would allow. Say we get 240,000, but they want 350 for their budget, but they have to provide the other $110,000 through what they already have in their bank account.
That was
So
what I
we
was
wouldn't
gonna
be
ask
able,
is, sorry, Barbara, could we essentially, and would that mean that we essentially change the number here on the bottom of page 5 on the budget to the number that we feel confident is accurate, and they would provide any additional funding for additional spending out of their own account?
Right, because we can't force them to use their money. They're a separate entity, so they're a nonprofit, so we can't force them to use their money, but we can reduce that number to say we're not confident that we can get that number. And with the DOR, now that this is the first year in effect, I do have to report what their revenues are. And when I say their revenues came in, let's say at 190, 200, and they want 360, they're not gonna approve the tax rate.
that would need to be reduced on the budget then. We'd need to reduce the number on the,
But I do think that we need to have a conversation with their committee. I don't know when, I don't know if they have a liaison or whatever, but somebody does have to have a conversation with their committee. I'm just telling you what I need to report to the DOR, and what I'm seeing coming in isn't covering $367,000.
I'll reach out to them tomorrow and reach out to Bill Hewitt over at KP Law and get some input from him on this.
okay.
I don't know who the administrator or the host is, but I'm trying to get in on the computer. If somebody could, there it is. Thanks.
So we got 3 Gregs in the meeting.
You can never
right.
have many Gregs.
I don't think it's good, to be honest with you, for me to be touching technology, but
What other comments or questions do we have on the budget?
Well, we haven't seen it. But so I don't know what's changed.
You mean the detailed budget or the one that's on here?
The one that's on here.
You haven't received this warrant right here?
Did we get this warrant?
We got this
all right.
earlier today.
That was in the warrant. Okay. Yeah. We just, all right, then.
Yeah, that was earlier this afternoon that the committee received it.
I didn't realize that the budget was in the warrant. I'm sorry. That's my fault.
Can I ask, I missed the last meeting. Where did we end up with the schools? Are we at level funded? What,
Scott, do you want to touch on that?
Actually, I'll let Sue answer that. I mean, the schools, they did cut quite a bit out on their second round. But whether it was service level fund, Sue.
Okay, so the schools did cut out a lot of their budget. They're not replacing the new positions that they were looking for, except for what is required by the state, which I think is maybe 1 or 2 positions, but then they cut in other areas. But the other areas that they cut in were cuts by one-time revenues. So you're gonna have a funding cliff at some point to recoup what they, they got some money from the CARES Act, and we took out $100,000 from their budget and made a warrant article for special needs IEP kids that when they come back, they've been out of school for 6 months almost, and when they come back in the fall, those IEP kids are probably going to need more services. So they had put that in their budget and they backed it out, and we used free cash to fund that. So there are going to be a few things that you're going to need to be cognizant of, that they're going to, the school and other departments that cut things are going to be looking to have back at some point in the next 2 or 3 years, but they did significantly cut back in their original request.
Are we looking at layoffs at all? Just not funding positions, new positions, or is it not replacing retiring positions, which is kind of like losing staff?
From my understanding is that they are having layoffs because they need to do these state funded mandates. So they need to hire people who are qualified to do certain things. So they have to let go of paraprofessional or, you know, other staff to make sure that they're providing for their state mandates. But they're definitely
those put
not
back?
hiring new people. They're going to have the same amount of staff as they had before.
Yeah, there was
So I-
several positions that they also decided not to fill, if I'm not
Right.
mistaken.
They're not
Right.
filling the additional positions that they wanted.
And it's
So
similar
they
to
were,
our side.
they were, sorry, Scott,
Go
say
ahead.
that again.
No,
No,
it's
they
just
were,
to the town side where we actually eliminated positions that would have been new.
right.
We did
So
it.
the school was looking for 8 total new positions before this all started coming down.
Right.
From what I understand, I think it was either 2 or 3 of those positions were things that the state has mandated that they need to add. And they were looking to not add the other 5 or 6 positions and use what Peter had said was they were looking to use atrophy of people leaving to make it essentially a zero gain.
Yeah. No. Okay.
And just while we're on the subject, it does have a lot to do with employees from the school department that have moved on and been laid off in other jobs that they've gone to, but we are unemployed. So our numbers for self-unemployment have jumped through the roof because they're allowed to come back to us for within a 12-month period. So they worked for a place for 3 months and they're getting laid off. We're on the hook for 9 months of their 3 months of
Right.
unemployment. So Sonia and I have had a discussion about it. I'm hoping that we can pass that through some of the CARES Act funding. But we're looking at numbers that have jumped because of unemployed people that used to work either for the school department or highway, but mostly it's school department employees that moved someplace else and got laid off someplace else, and now we're on the hook. I hate to say on the hook, that sounds bad, but
Responsible for
yeah, we're responsible for
portion.
paying a portion if they did not work for that other company for more than 12 months.
right.
Did these people voluntarily leave here?
Even
Yes.
if they voluntarily leave, if they're not in another job for more than 12 months, the state unemployment allows them to go back 12 months to any employer that they were employed for. And I could probably, I can pull up the email from Sonia if you give me a second as to what estimated the cost.
Go ahead. I have my. Oh.
School budget looks like, from the numbers that you've given us, that it's up about 4.7% over what it was last year. That's all, which is about 1.1 million. And it's up about 400,000 from what you gave us in January. But we know that they had to add things because of the, whatchamacallit, the Chapter 70
The Student Opportunity Act.
Student Opportunity Act. Yeah. So that's what's changed from what I can see.
What was that called? The student, what?
Student
Student
Opportunity Act.
Opportunity Act.
What is
We
that?
talked about that with the schools when they came in. We had gotten a little bit of presentation from them. We talked about it at 1 or 2 of the meetings beforehand as well. So the extra funding that was intended to bridge the gap from state funds to what school departments were actually spending across the state.
Yeah.
which from all accounts, we're not actually getting that money this year, but we have to abide by the regulations that the state is putting in if we want to get that money in the future.
While we're waiting for Sue, do you want to vote
Yeah.
on the, oh, is she ready? I was gonna say we can vote on the thing, the Griffin's area.
I was thinking about that, and I figured as soon as I opened my mouth, Sue would find the email. So I thank you, Chris, for hastening that process.
She had a total of 175, 761.
Okay, I found the email.
All right, what do we got?
Right. March, we had $1,800 in unemployment. In April, it shot up to 14,000, and in May, it shot up to 19,000. So she's estimating an approximate number of $20,000 a month from now until December. And that's based on her high number that she just got last in March.
Yep.
In May, sorry. So hopefully it can be recovered through COVID, but
Yep.
Just so you guys are aware that there is an unemployment issue.
Is that in the budget now?
No,
Oh,
What do we have in the OPEB account?
that has nothing to do with OPEB though.
Okay.
This is just strictly unemployment. And currently, oh, I'm trying to maneuver your document.
We need to go up or down.
I need to go down, I guess up. Yeah, like that way. A little bit further. And there's your unemployment number. We currently have $70,000 in there. And like I said, we've already, according to her email, we've already spent that.
And we're essentially predicting,
Unless everybody gets back to work. It's gonna,
unless everyone gets back to work, we're predicting essentially 120,000 over the first 6 months of the fiscal year.
Yeah, so you're looking 20, 40, 60, 75, plus what we've spent in the couple $2,000 a month. So yeah, you're looking at probably by June 30th being in deficit about $60,000.
And then we'd certainly need to budget that amount for at least the first
6 months of the next year.
6 months of so July, August, September, October, November, December, half of that amount.
Do
We
we
hope.
know the people who are the people who have gone on the books for that? Do we know when they were let go, when they left town employment? because from what I understand from what you were saying, essentially, if they were employed elsewhere for less than 12 months, we cover the gap between how long they were there. We cover how long they were employed with us, essentially. So if they were elsewhere for 3 months and with us for 9 months of the year, we cover 9 months worth of.
No, I think it's if they were at the job, the most recent job for 3 months, then that job picks up those 3 months, and then we have to pick up the additional 9 months.
Right, that's what I was saying.
Oh,
Yeah, so as long as they were, even if they were employed with them for 3 and us for 6 and somebody else for 3, as long as they were employed full-time during a year, those 3 employers would have to split the cost of their unemployment.
And is it proportionally splitting the cost with how
Yes.
long they were there? So
Yes.
do we know for the people who have gone onto unemployment that we are paying for, do we know when they left town employment?
I'm sure Sonia can give you that. She did not specify in her email, I guess for privacy issues for those people who are collecting unemployment, but she did say that the bulk of it is not from our layoffs, but from layoffs from people who have moved on, and they can still collect on us.
Right.
I don't
So
think it
my
matters.
question is, if we have an idea of the people that are on it, when they went, how much of each of their unemployment the town will have to cover, because I would imagine if it was if there were a certain number that were school department, if they were employed, say, through September, like July through September, that's 3 months that we would have to cover.
I don't know the month. I don't know the months, Matt, but she says that 35 employees filed new claims in March, April, and May, and only 11 were furloughed as part-time employees in Abington. So basically, the 11 furloughed are only getting part-time wages from us, and the other 24 are full-time employees someplace else, and we're picking up that expense. But she doesn't specify how many months that we're picking up on all those other 24 employees.
Okay, the 11 furloughed are those, I would guess those are positions that are still in our FY21 budget. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm assuming that they are.
Okay, so we are already covering for those employees, whether it's in salary line items or unemployment. So
Correct.
I think those we would not be particularly concerned about.
Yes,
It's
it's
the
the other
24 who we're covering for at least a portion of their unemployment.
Correct.
So it would be good to know how long for each of those 24 we're covering part of their unemployment.
I think
Okay.
the unemployment ratio, and I'm guessing here, I don't really know, that it's the share that you have is for the last 12 months, when they start unemployment, not as they go further, it changes. So, we're going to have to cover them for as long as they're on unemployment.
That's
And
likely to be the case.
unemployment lasts, normally, in a normal situation, lasts, 20 weeks, something like that? Maybe 25, I forget exactly.
Yeah, they're going out to December 31st right now.
Yeah. Now I think they've extended it, so it's worse for us.
So rather than it being say it was a 6 month breakdown, rather than us being responsible for 6 months of unemployment for that person, we are responsible for 50% of their unemployment for as long as they're on unemployment.
Correct.
And that's, at least as of right now, through the end of the calendar year.
Correct.
So it would be good to know what our percentages are there so that we can figure out how much we need to put into that line item.
Well, she's estimating it at $20,000 a month. So we're going to need $120,000 to get through
The end of the
July,
calendar year.
December. That's July through December.
Yep.
We have 70, so we're gonna need at least another 50 to get through the end of the calendar year. So we're either gonna have to,
And then,
That's this calendar year, though. We have to plan our
Correct.
budget for
yeah,
21.
I'm aware of that. My thought is we're either going to have to take money now and put it in there to fully fund it, or hope that the, the situation changes, people do go back to work and the number significantly decreases
Right.
after the first of the year. And again, a lot of that was why we're putting quite a bit into stabilization and into your
And into the reserve fund.
reserve.
Well, and we have the hope that we can, that we may be able to put that onto the COVID.
Very
Relief.
much hoping that.
yeah.
I'm
CARES
hoping a
Act.
lot of relief is going to come, with the next wave of stimulus.
Yep.
Or next, package federal. We're hoping that more of that would be revenue replacement for communities, for municipalities, for states, for whatever. We don't know that yet. We know we have a good amount of money that was earmarked that's in Plymouth County. That was earmarked for expenses and other related expenses, and our physical expenses and things that we've done to date, won't add up quite as much as these kind of expenses. So we are hoping that these are the kind of things that we can go to them and say, look, this is where we really need to use that money. That's where the money would really come in handy, is to help offset our unemployment compensation that's severely increased due to this. But right now, the guidance isn't there for that. Right now, their guidelines don't allow us to use the money for that.
So the question is, do we change this line recognizing that we know at least through the end of the year, it's likely to be closer to 120,000, although slightly less, because as Matt says, the furloughed employees aren't, but won't be unemployed after September, we hope. And then add 35,000 to it for this, the 6 months, first 6 months of next calendar year, because that's what we usually average.
But where would you want to pull that money from?
Well, that's the question.
Okay, so I have read legislation that says that sort of like snow and ice, you can deficit spend in this area, and that they will allow us to amateurize it, as they did that huge snow that we had back, 2012,
15.
2014 or something like that. So we are going to be allowed to amortize those expenses. So I don't know that I would jump to the gun right now and add the money to the budget without, I can do further research on it, but I'm pretty sure they said what's not covered, we will be able to amortize over a 5-year period.
Okay.
And again, we're putting a healthy amount into reserves and stabilization that.
Yep.
On the offshore.
But this is certainly something that we could use that for.
I would recommend, yeah.
Okay.
Again, though, that's something that you have to, you'd have to count on town meeting voting to take money out of stabilization to fund that.
Yeah.
Unless we use the reserve fund money that we're setting aside.
Yeah, and but we don't know where we'll be if the situation gets worse.
Right.
That number goes up. If the situation gets better, the number goes down.
Yep.
But I certainly do think that it, although it's probably been tough in the past, you can never really think of a better time to say there's a rainy day fund, and this is.
Yeah, it's raining.
It's raining bad. Yeah.
Other thoughts on whether or not we look to move monies to increase the unemployment line item? And
My suggestion would be that this is something that we revisit in a fall town meeting or fall meeting.
And the tentative plan is to have a fall town meeting, things like the zoning articles, the road acceptance articles. We will need to act on those articles as a town at some point in the not too distant future. So the tentative plan is to have a fall special town meeting.
I feel like we'll have a better idea of some of the variables by that point, maybe.
Better than changing it 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
Change once when you get a better handle on exactly what it is. That's the theory.
Yes.
Yep.
Anyone have differing opinions, other points to make regarding that? Mr. Tyler is being awfully quiet. And by Mr., I mean Dr.
Why poke the bear?
Because that's what the bear is there for. Without any there, other comments or things to bring up on the budget?
I have just a couple. One is the planning department. You took out the new planning director or whatever it's called, but I think you left in the part-time assistant that was added when that person was going to be there. And I don't know if that's necessary because without that person.
Quick question, was the part-time assistant added there or was the part-time assistant already there?
It was added because from what I remember of the discussion with that on that department, because even without that person, the planning department is up about 50%.
I thought it was existing staff.
No, there was an additional, maybe it's additional hours for existing.
Okay.
She did get additional hours. She shifted some library hours over to the planning department just to try to keep up on stuff. So that is additional hours of 4 extra hours a week in the planning department.
And
that was additional for the person increasing their hours,
The existing
or it was
person there,
taken, or were the hours taken from another department?
the hours were taken from library and shifted over to planning.
So budget, overall budget, it's neutral.
Same thing.
Okay. Good question, Chris.
Yeah. And the nurse and I'm sure there's a good reason for this, but the public health nursing went up about 26,000 from when we saw it in January. It had 18.5 and went up to 45.
We, our public health nurse was, it was through South Shore Visiting Nurse Association, South Shore VNA, and they handle a lot of different things for us. And they have decided that they're no longer going to be in the business of doing that. And it's just something that's happened. I was dealing with it on my way out the door in Duxbury. And they're dealing with it in Whitman and in Rockland, I believe. All of a sudden, everybody's left without a public health nurse. This is probably the worst possible time that you could not have a public health nurse. So where there's very few organizations, Partners was doing it, they've backed out of it. The different organizations that were doing it just aren't doing it anymore. So we've gone in, we're hiring our own public health nurse. So some of the monies were there that were already assigned to, that we were using to pay South Shore VNA. And so I'm not sure how much, but I know we did add a little bit to it.
Yeah, we added 30,000.
So it's a position, it's an absolutely necessary position, especially now. But, these things come up every year. There's something, a lot of times it's foodborne, but there's other, different illnesses that people come up with that you do need to do tracing and tracking for wellness things with the, with the elderly population and stuff. So.
Okay, that's the explanation. That's
sorry.
This is, I hate to ask the question where something went down, but The liability insurance drops.
Sue got us a better deal.
Yeah, Sue talked about that one. I think it was last week.
Never mind. That's really all I have.
Did you want Sue to touch on that again? Just the
No,
the
that's all right.
Reader's Digest version? Okay.
Yeah.
Other budget questions, comments before we move on? As discussed especially with the PEG access, PEG Enterprise will look to get more information and have that so that we can make our vote next week. Maybe we'll even have information from the state by then.
Maybe.
Not holding my breath. All right. Next article up for bids on The Price is Right. Article number 6, which we voted to defer, is the FEMA article. Just as a heads up, that one is either going to be removed, causing renumbering of articles, or it is going to be recommended to be passed over as it's no longer being required by the federal government.
No, I think the plan is to actually have it removed.
Okay.
Because from the email that we got and the recommendation was even to any communities that did adopt this, they actually have to go through the process of unadopting it, which would lead me to believe that if we would be better off to not have it at our town meeting for the fear of somehow, some way, somebody making us adopt it and then us being in violation. So there's no reason to keep it on there. I say we're going to just remove it.
So it doesn't ultimately change our recommendations on what we've done. I just wanted to bring it to light so that you all knew and that anyone at home watching knew as well. The next one is article number 7, which is the article to put the monies saved in the capital from what we've done with the capital plan and other articles that we've removed into our reserve fund. I just had a question on this. My notes from last week, Sue said that we were voting on it at $99,000, and the new warrant that we got today, I'm scrolling down to it, right here lists it as 90,000. And I vaguely
Okay,
remembered,
so-
I remembered discussion of 99 or 90.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, and I sent you an email that said the extra $9,000 was a warrant article that was raise and appropriate. So instead of having it go 90 from certified free cash and 9 from raise and appropriate, which was part of the budget in the revenue accommodations, I increased the reserve fund in the budget $9,000 and reduced this $9,000 so that it's just one funding source. So
Yep.
instead of $50,000 in the budget for reserve fund, it's $59,000, and here on this article it's $90,000.
So trying to find the reserve fund.
All the way at the top,
Very top.
right there.
Yep.
There it is, 59.
So now it's 59 there and 90 here. It's just to make the sources
Yep.
of funding easier.
Make life easier on you.
Yeah.
There, which I am fine with. Do we need to revote our recommendation since the number has changed?
The numbers change down, so I don't think that you have to. I think you only have to revote if the number goes up. But your choice.
Just for formality's sake, I would take a motion to reopen our
Motion to reopen Article
7.
7.
Second.
Second.
The motion and a second. I believe it was Barbara and Chris. All those in favor of reopening Article 7? All those opposed? Abstaining? I don't know if I'm missing votes, but
Before you take the revote on that, Matt?
Yep.
You want to take the revote on the Griffin's Dairy, because that, if you don't vote the 5,000 for Griffin's Dairy, it will increase your number up
That is
$5,000 on
that
that
is
article.
that is a very good point. So for the moment, Article 7 is reopened. Let us, with that, pop over to Article 16, Griffin's Dairy. And let's get Greg all in a tizzy again. I passed along information that Scott had provided from the Griffin's Dairy Committee and from John Stone, the DPW chief. Did everybody have a chance to look at that?
Yes.
Greg,
Saw
Greg
that.
you're disappearing into your background there, Greg.
I mean, it's a hell of a background.
It is indeed.
I would say the only thing that makes me just feel weird about it is that in there it says that the people already decided to do something, and they already bought it.
Yeah, and just, I wasn't aware of that, but I did, after I spoke with the committee last week, I did have a long conversation with John Stone and asked him what he thought about it. And certainly I, started off with, is it more feasible that we buy you a piece of equipment and maybe you have something to hand me down? Because, our concerns were that, if we did give them this equipment, is it even robust enough? I think Greg, I think some of the concerns were, is this something that's just going to break after a year or 2 years? Are they going to even be able to handle keeping up with it? So, I had that discussion with John. John said that they do him quite a big favor by taking care of that yard, that it is a huge burden that they don't have to deal with it. And with that, I asked him to take a look and see if the equipment was robust enough, if it could handle. And he went up to Four Seasons and well, you saw the result of what he found out up at Four Seasons. We're not beholden to Four Seasons in any way, shape, or form. If town meeting and or this committee doesn't want to go forward with this, by all means, Four Seasons will, I'm sure, be able to return it or sell it, or somebody will buy it, or maybe it'll go on the discount rack. I don't know. But I think that the committee, whatever their conversations must have been with the prior town manager, I think that they would like to believe that this was just not a big deal. And they were, again, they offered, they did not want $10,000 for certain. They certainly don't even want $5,000 or need that much. I mean, it's you saw the price of the mower, it was $3,000. John Stone looked at it. He feels as though it is it is adequate for the needs that they're doing. As I said, having been out there, it's definitely a great amenity to the town. And John,
Huge asset to the town.
yeah.
Where do we fall with the liability though? That was my only.
I did send
So sorry, Scott, I can address that. Apologies
Thank you.
for interrupting. Last week we did discuss that. It is only committee members who use the equipment to mow there, which they fall under special municipal employees, so the town is covered in that regard.
Fabulous.
We're all still concerned about the potential of a wood chipper, though.
They don't want a wood chipper anymore.
I even talked to John, and I defer to him to know best on what. I don't even know where this Griffin's Dairy is. But yeah, no, I know. It's just I still don't know where it is. So bad, but these are the things that are just a little bit sort of make me a little nervous, right? These are Sue just talked about unemployment stuff popping up that we're not really thinking, or we weren't thinking about as much as getting to that number. These are, I believe we're going to have more of these things. So then, you know, we're going to be in 2021. I just think looking to do more cutting or whatever. And I think if we plan correctly this year, which it might be tough for a lot of people in a lot of situations, but it might be easier going forward. And it's not about the $3,000 for this particular thing. It's about the $3,000 for this, the new truck for the deputy chief. I mean, I can keep going down the list. We have to, at some point, cut everything as much as humanly possible. And then in 2021, if everything's okay, do whatever we possibly can. But again, the one thing that makes me somewhat nervous is I think there's going to be more things like the cable access thing. It's just, I don't know. You guys know a lot more about this stuff than I do when it comes to all of this stuff. It just seems like, and I know some people have cut some, but like even just the school thing, I don't want to see people lose their job, but that's a pretty big reality. Not just lose positions we wanted to add, but that's happening in every single everything. I mean, I was just watching in Cambridge or something for the people protesting that they lost their jobs. I mean, it's happening everywhere. So I just think if we don't take this a little bit more, I don't mean seriously, like people aren't taking it serious, but meaning cutting seriously, I think it's going to end up, my opinion, I think it's going to come back to bite us in the ass.
I think
I think Scott has a good point too, where if we can at least vote that it's okay to have it there to spend, but freeze the spending until we know where we're at. And if we say that they can't spend it, they don't spend it. It can't come through my office. They can't make a purchase without Scott's approval and my signing a piece of paper that's saying that yes, this is approved. So it's just a mechanism to say if we don't have a bigger pandemic and we don't have a bigger problem, that these people might get their cruisers in their cars and you know, lawnmowers or whatever, but we are not spending it until we know that it is feasible to spend. Correct, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's so much up in the air, and a good part of it is, you know, maybe there will be some revenue coming down from the state and from the federal government or a program that'll help our revenue deficits, or you know, maybe we will get the economy rolling again, in the you know, they're going to have the vaccine and we're not going to have another slowdown. But let's, you know, what I'm saying is let's not hamstring us from going about our operations, but we're going to do it responsibly. If things are going well, you know, I'm not saying we're going to buy 2 cruises, but if things are working out, then we probably say, all right, what's more important? Deputy fire chief car or a cruiser, because we can do one or the other. Or maybe it's, okay, we can do the fire chief's car and a cruiser. And maybe we can finally get the mower. But at the same time, I may be coming at that special and saying, all of the money that you appropriated last year, you're going to have to take back and put it into your stabilization because we're going to need it for something else.
And listen, I completely understand that logic. My only sort of caution to that is to say, this is big enough at this point. I mean, just look at the amount of people that have lost their job. Like, this is like, no one's has ever seen anything like this ever. So I think there are certain times where you say almost no to everything, and then just let's play the game next year, maybe. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, and I get you, but like, so this is a very good, because you know, yeah, you want to do that, and I understand it, but then when you go out there and you see what they're actually using to mow with, is a huge hazard. I mean, these things.
Way less
people, I really want you to go look, only because it's going to take like MacGyver to keep these mowers going.
Listen.
So if they're not going, then we need John Stone's guys.
100%.
Or we shutter it. We close the operation down.
100%. This is way less about. Sorry. So way less about like the lawnmower for those guys, the $3 grand.
It's talking more macro.
And more just like when you add it all up, you know what I mean? Like Because, for instance, if I was John Stone, I'd be pissed if these guys didn't get the lawnmower. And then the chief's going to be mad if he doesn't get that. And then the police chief's going to be mad if he doesn't get the cruisers. I mean, you could keep going down the list. But, like, if everybody knew that no one was really getting anything, again, I know it's tough, but I've had to go through this for my own business in the last 2 or 3 months. If everybody knows, listen, we literally have to put a stop on all of this for right now, or the vast majority. I'm really not talking about the $3,000 for the lawnmower. That's going to help out a lot. Like that one, the wood chipper was my bigger issue. It's just the other things that add up to when you start adding them up, they get into the $150,000 to $200,000 range, and then you start, you know, the fire engines getting restored a little bit. Then now we're in $300,000. So it's just one of those things that my big fear is that next year, like, there's a really big issue, and if there's a really big issue, it's just gonna stink. My only thing is to try to be as conservative as humanly possible right now. Like, for instance, if I wanted to plan right now for 2021, I probably wouldn't be planning on buying myself a new car, right? If you wanted to plan on that, I'm in a little bit of a different situation, but like that's the way you sort of have to think. Like, it's probably not going to go well until then, so maybe I can revisit it then. And that's my only thing.
But Greg, you might put the money aside and not allow yourself to spend it.
Sure.
So
yeah, and that's why I said
with a spending freeze.
Yeah.
But still, having the money there so that if things do look better, or if something happens and you absolutely really need that particular item or that service, whatever it may be, you have put the money aside, and then you have to have the discussion. All right, how are we going? How are we going to work this?
Yeah,
so I think we accomplished that with a spending freeze, which is where you're at right now, right, Scott?
Yeah, we're in a spending freeze. All of this is going to be on hold. I mean, there are some things. I mean, we have to keep operating.
Right.
So yeah, there are things that are going to come up that we're going to have to deal with and take care of. This in particular, again, if we just say no across the board, the 3 engines that the fire chief has to put money into, they're not going to get better.
Sure.
The program that we have for replacement of police vehicles, we don't get caught up on it. We just end up further behind. So yeah, I can say, and again, it's easier to plan that stuff now for next year's budget to say, look, guys, you didn't have time to figure this out last year. We put a budget together. We were going along. We've got some stuff we may or may not get. But when you're thinking about next year's budget, yeah, you're definitely, we're not going to be able to do these programs. We're not going to, we're going to relook at capital, and there's things that we're not going to be able to pull forward.
Sure.
But again, I mean, to put these off and then know that you're not going to be able to do more things next year. Now we're 3 years out, maybe having in the interim, having to take money out of reserve for whether it's, unemployment issues or, a bad insurance year or, whatever else may come along that we end up needing that money and the revenues don't come back as fast as we think they're going to come back. Now we're going to have cars up on blocks, I mean, so, I don't want to we can't just shut everything down, but we can be careful. We can be responsible. And certainly, I mean, we've already just started talking. I mean, we have to start. I mean, before you know it, we already have to start figuring what's going to be on a special town meeting, but we're almost at a point where we have to start a budget for next year because we're getting so far into this.
Equipment and property is something that the questions comes up quite a bit.
Sure.
Why didn't we take care of that before now? Or why did we let it get so bad? Or so, things. We can put certain things off, but that's how we end up in the position of how did it get this bad? How did that draw get that bad at the town hall? Because during hard times, those are the things we were like, you know what, can't afford that right now, or we don't have the money to upkeep that right now. There was a time when we really weren't even taking care of the, we weren't funding to take care of the senior center. We were funding at such a bare minimum. And things get worse. And then you end up having to pay more because you didn't keep up with it when you should have. So I feel like, you know, equipment and property, we really need to try very hard to stay on top of.
And the last thing, by the way, I think whatever Scott wants to do, because it's a freeze, you know, we can look at it later and we can spend it accordingly. I'm fine with it. The only other thing I will offer is that if the deputy chief is in the union, if the union says he should have a car, then I would say he should have a car. If he doesn't, then I would say no. And the reason that I'm saying that's because over the last week, I've looked very hard at like certain things like this. I've tried to read up as much as possible. I really don't know that much, but I've tried to read up as much as possible. But the union is who negotiates on behalf of that person. If we're now negotiating on other stuff on that person's behalf, it's just weird. Like I'm all into the no union thing, and I know I get in trouble for saying it, but people get paid based on what they do, on their actual merit. Did it work this year for you? Did you do good? So I don't understand the union stuff, but I do understand that the union does negotiate on behalf of their people. And if that's not part of it, then I would say I don't understand it. And maybe somebody can try to make me understand it, but I don't know. I mean,
well, I'm sure I'm not going to be able to change your mind about it, but I can tell you just from what I've seen in the past, it is not unusual. The fire chief, it's his responsibility for the equipment and putting the plan forward for the equipment, including the cars. I don't know of any town where a deputy chief doesn't have a take-home vehicle. And that's not just in towns that I've worked in, but
sure.
in general.
I'm not sure about Brockton.
It is the second command vehicle. You know, it's an incident command vehicle. So I don't know that it's not something that would be negotiated. If it was something that would, you know, be negotiated, it would be a different aspect of it. You know, it would be, you know, the captains, most captains, or not most, but a lot of captains, they have a vehicle that's specifically there for the captains. Some of them, if they're in a position where they do other functions, they may negotiate a take-home vehicle. But a deputy chief it's by function. You're the chief if A, the chief is gone and away, or B, if the chief is on another incident and there's multiple incidents.
The deputy chief isn't in the union.
Yeah, I believe he is.
Oh, yeah, that's the point. That's why I looked it up, and it says he is. Again, I don't know about Abington. I'm just saying in the stuff that I read, it said it was. So that was my big thing. That again, I don't know anything about the stuff, to be completely honest with you. I just read as much as I possibly could over the last week about that one specific thing. So
yeah, so yeah, normally, yeah, you would never negotiate with an individual in the union. So we wouldn't have him here. We would never have him here and negotiate on his behalf of, hey, what do you want for a vehicle? What do you want in it?
Yeah.
Do you want a Camaro with T-roofs, or, you know, you know what I'm saying? But
Yep.
the fire chief who's responsible for those vehicles, just like he is for the fire engine, it is his responsibility to put it forward. And it is, again, like I said, it's the second command vehicle. So
to pull back, as we are technically in discussion on Article 16, Griffin's Dairy. Do we have anything further on the Griffin's Dairy article specifically?
Motion.
I took the family down to Griffin's Dairy the other day. It's beautiful. It's really nice.
It really is.
That's all
It's
I gotta
very
say.
beautiful. And Greg, I will say, as I'm routing us back to the topic, the specifics at hand, I do appreciate the macro look that you're taking at this, and the point of view that you're bringing on it, and the questions you're asking.
nobody's ever accused me of being micro.
Greg, Greg, you got to get down there though and take a little tour of Griffin's Dairy.
Yes.
Bring the kids, let them run around.
Yeah, the kids will love it.
Maybe I can just drop them off there.
So do we have any?
Can they ride a mower?
Yes.
Do they cover children of finance committee members as special municipal employees?
They're
Yes.
so blessed.
Do we have any motions on Article 16?
Motion to
Motion to approve.
Article 16 for $3,500 for the purpose of purchasing the mower and the weed whacker and the trailer.
I would just leave it, I don't know.
Leave it at 5,000, which is what it's printed as
Well,
right now.
Yeah, well, even if you reduce it, I would just leave it to purchase lawn equipment. I don't think that there's any need, I don't know that they definitely need a trailer, because I know that there are a couple on site, but I know they do need the mower and a weed whacker.
I think John had said that there is storage there for a mower.
There is
There
a shed.
is, yes.
Outside.
Yep.
And he
There's a
actually-
shed that they keep things in now.
Yep. And he actually has a chipper if they really ever needed it. That I'm assuming that they might be Griffin's Dairy Council people could talk to him about maybe bringing it over there and his guys using it.
And I think that would be a much better decision, so that people who are trained and accustomed to using a chipper are the ones who are using the chipper.
Right.
So Russ, are you making your motion to approve to recommend Article 16 with a sum of $3,500?
No, I mean, motion to recommend Article 16 for $5,000.
Second.
Motion and a second. Hang on. My pen is deciding to die on me as I'm trying to take notes. That's not good. Oh, there we go. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on Article 16? Without any, all those in favor of recommending Article 16? All those opposed? Abstaining? Sham, I couldn't tell what that said. That?
I just said no. That way, in case I would left myself on mute like I did.
Okay. All right, so with that, we will go back to Article 7, which is the article that we have motioned to reconsider, which is transferring, at this point, $90,000 into the reserve fund. And Sue, as we were having that discussion and I was looking at the article for Griffin's Dairy, I realized that this was a raise and appropriate, so it actually wouldn't have changed the amount of Article 7 anyway, based on the earlier discussion. However, do we have a motion to recommend Article 7 at the new amount of $90,000?
Motion to recommend.
Second.
Justin, was that you with the second? Joe, then Justin?
Yep.
Okay, I again looked down. I gotta get out of the habit of that. Any further discussion on Article 7? Without any, all those in favor of recommending Article 7? All those opposed? Abstaining? It is recommended. The only other thing that I had for recommendations was the road acceptance articles. are not going to be dealt with at this town meeting. The Board of Selectmen are not going to have hearings in time to deal with those, and they chose to do that intentionally. But what that means for our purposes is that there will have to be a motion at town meeting to indefinitely postpone those 4 articles, 4 or 5. 4 articles. This is a place where either Scott or Mr. Tyler would give me specific advice on what we as the Finance Committee need to do as far as that is concerned. Do we need to, I believe we have to have at least some form of recommendation, whether it's defer or pass over.
It was being removed.
I thought we deferred. Well, I mean, yeah, we deferred to somebody last time.
I don't think, I went back through my notes. I don't think that we actually deferred on these. I believe that we had said that, that from what I found in my notes, we had said that they were likely to be removed, so we weren't going to take any action on them. But they are going to be on the warrant so that they can be postponed. So I think we do need, I might be wrong, but I do believe we need to have some sort of statement on them from the Finance Committee.
In my past, the board would motion or your vote would be to indefinitely postpone.
Okay.
I'm not sure what that would mean if in your town meeting. I would want to check to make sure, because we don't want to do it that would prejudice them from coming back next year.
So could we?
Maybe a legal counsel, you can ask legal counsel.
I'll be talking to Greg Corbo tomorrow. So I'll get an answer from Greg.
So, Mr. Chairman, just in deference to brevity, the committee can option to pass over, and it doesn't prejudice any future action that'll be represented. It just simply means that if it's a typographical error and moderator and the town manager say, we're not going to entertain it at the ATM, then great. But for the purposes of us in housekeeping, we can just simply motion to pass over them and get on with
I was going to say I think my preference would be something along those lines, whether it's motion to pass over or motion to defer to town council or the Board of Selectmen or whoever it might be.
I'll motion to pass over.
Second.
Any further discussion on the road acceptance articles 23, 24, 25, and 26? Without any, all those in favor of passing over those articles? All those opposed, abstaining, it is unanimous. And with the exception of the budget, we have provided recommendations on all articles at this point.
Can we clarify the treasurer collector stuff? Did you guys defer that to the treasurer collector or did you guys approve it?
Let me see.
didn't.
That was something that I found what we had done on that. We motioned to recommend.
Recommend, okay.
And I had questioned that when I was taking my notes before this meeting, and I found back in my notes what we had done.
Okay.
It was actually a motion from, it was a motion from Barbara, seconded by Joe. So, and approved unanimously to recommend those articles. So I will provide that information to Scott and Sue and to the town moderator, Sean, with all of our recommendations after.
What are the final questions on the budget so I can make sure we get those answers?
So the final items that we are discussing on the budget, the Abington CAM account, I believe, is the biggest one.
Okay.
And then where were we at in our final estimation on unemployment? I believe that the sense of the committee was to leave it as is and deal with that in a special town meeting in the fall.
And or as a reserve.
Correct. Is that correct? That was my feel for where we were at as a committee.
So you're not taking a vote on the unemployment until after we know whether or not the CARES Act covers it?
Correct.
Okay.
So leaving as is in the budget right now, hoping the CARES Act covers it, and for anything that is not covered, we would deal with either through a reserve fund transfer or transfer out of stabilization at a special town.
Oh,
Barbara?
reserve fund transfer, maybe for this year, but next year it would be a foreseen because we're discussing it
Correct.
now, not an unforeseen. So just my 2 cents on that.
Which next year do you mean? Fiscal year 21?
2021.
Going into the 22 budget.
In 2021, the budget we're working on now, this is we see the possibility here.
So you're saying?
I'm
Sorry,
just
go ahead.
adding my 2 cents that it's not, when we're discussing it now. So as far as a reserve fund transfer, it's not an unforeseen circumstance. But it's an unforeseen circumstance right here in 2020, but it's not an unforeseen circumstance in 2021.
So
I
that
get
was
what
what,
I was trying to say, is that the reserve fund transfers are for unforeseen, unexpected expenditures. And we're saying that, she's saying
Like,
that
we didn't
not
see this
unforeseen
coming
or
when we planned the budget, and
We
as
just
far
don't
as the
know what
reserve fund transfers.
Yeah, we don't know what the full effect of it's going to be. So maybe then, then it's just, we go to town meeting. Not do it
could
as a
be
reserve.
unforeseen
if we need
based
to.
on the effects of it, because we don't know what the CARES Act is covering and what it isn't covering at the point that we go back to town meeting, that we go to town meeting.
And there's the amortization issue because we don't know what the
Right.
actual cost on a yearly basis is. If
So
we're
the-
allowed to.
so the
carry-
question, Barbara, I have for you is, are you looking to have us increase that line item for the?
I'm not, I'm just giving my 2 cents about unforeseen circumstances and reserve fund transfers.
Yep.
Duly noted.
All right. So with that put aside, then it is really just the ABCAM issue that we're waiting on for the budget, and determining the revenue source and amount from the town for theirs.
I'm kind of with Greg, and I still think at some point this budget has to come down. But if everyone thinks that now's not the time, that the time is in September when we know what the state, how much it's going to come down, I guess I'm fine with that. But, I think we know, we're pretty sure something's going to happen. Your revenue that you're showing here is higher than it was in January. So
the revenue, just quick point on that. The revenue in January was intentionally conservative.
Yeah.
And based on only at most 6 months worth of receipts.
Yeah.
It is much more solidified as to what we know the tax base, like the property tax base, will be for FY21. That number, with the exception of people who default and won't be able to pay, will not go down. The excise tax and the meal tax we're trying to factor in with stabilization and those type of numbers. The big number that we expected some fluctuation with was the state aid number, and that's where we did chop $1.2 million off of that, assuming that it would go down by approximately 10%, based off of numbers that we've seen in the past, including a lot of what you had provided from the last time around.
okay, no,
So,
I get it. I just figured I'd raise it.
Yep.
last time.
no, and we definitely know there is the potential for it to go lower. There's also the potential for a bounce back. We're certainly more hoping for the bounce back, but not planning on that, at least as of right now.
I'll be happy if we're level going into the next year.
Absolutely. Anyone have anything else regarding the warrant articles? All right, with that, we move to liaison reports. Does anyone have any liaison reports? Correspondence, there is none. We have not been able to get to the mailbox. And meeting minutes, we still do not have minutes. I did get an offer to help compile the minutes. So hopefully by next meeting, if I get some time and have some help, we might have some of our minutes from the last several meetings. But at least as of right now, still don't have meeting minutes put together to vote on. Which brings us to our next meeting. On the agenda, we had to be determined because we weren't sure if we would get through everything in this meeting. We still have the budget outstanding. So our next meeting will be next week, June 10th, 7 o'clock, once again on Zoom. Any further discussions? Anything anyone needs to bring up? Barbara with a motion to adjourn.
Second.
And Russ. Any discussion on the motion? Without any, all those in favor of adjourning?
You're here.
All those opposed? Katie is opposed to adjourning. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much. Appreciate your time and efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you.